Today's talk is titled, Do You Want the Real Thing? Do you want the real thing? Do you want truth? Do you want the actual thing that you desire most? Do you truly want it? And if the answer is yes, then you will do whatever it takes to attain it. If the answer is maybe, or if the answer is abruptly no, then you will spend your whole life in an illusion. You will spend your whole life chasing illusions, chasing fantasies, chasing fears, running from pain, or in some cases running towards pain and avoiding pleasure. But in most cases, running towards pleasure and avoiding pain. You see, the reason that we wander around this world, this planet aimlessly, is because we don't want the real thing. If we actually wanted the real thing, we would go after the real thing. Most people don't want the real thing, because the real thing requires you to renounce a lot of what we have identified with, a lot of what we have known ourselves to be. To attain the real thing requires us to pretty much give up everything to attain it. And most are not willing to do that. Most would rather stay comfortable. Most would rather continue to live this life of insincerity, this life of chasing. To what end? When does it end? Well, it doesn't. It doesn't unless you're after the real thing. This is the great work that the alchemists of old would talk about. This is what the ancient yogis, gurus, this is what they understood. It's not even about self-improvement, because that's another form of chasing. I spent many years chasing self-improvement, trying to improve myself. It's a scam. It's another way of chasing. It's not the real thing. The real thing is here, it's always been here, and it always will be here. And it requires your utmost dedication, your utmost devotion to its attainment, to its achievement. And you may say, well, if it's here, then how can we possibly attain it or achieve it? Well, attainment is not something that happens in the future. It is something that happens here and now. It is some decision that you make in the present, right here, right now. And that decision says, I'm going to do it, that's it, period. I will give up everything to attain this. Back in India, in ancient times, pretty much pre-1700s, you would have what are called the Brahmins or the ascetics. And these are people that would give up everything in their life to attain enlightenment, to attain nirvana, to attain samadhi. They'd give up everything. They'd give up sexuality, they would give up food, they would give up building a family. They would give it all up to attain that which they desired most. Why? Because the calling inside of them was so deep. It was so just this insatiable hunger to attain it that there was no other option. There was no other option other than death. So what most people do is they walk around life, they walk around this world, and they are satisfied with temporary, fleeting pleasures, fleeting highs, fleeting words of encouragement, fleeting trophies, accomplishments, recognition, validation. We chase it all. Pleasure, pain. We live life in this eternal chase, and we never experience the real thing. Why? Because the real thing requires us to give it all up. And we've grown familiar with what is, and we've lost the fire within us. We've lost the deep longing to devote ourselves to something so magnificently huge to us. Doesn't always mean it's some great accomplishment, building the next billion-dollar company or anything like that. It could be something as small as wanting to sincerely, build a farm and have a few children and live a life of peace and quiet. Or it could be something as grandiose as, raising $1 billion for a startup. It doesn't matter what it is. The only thing that matters is your devotion to it. And most things are not worth devoting our time, energy, and resources to. It's just not. If you look around at the world, you think about how many things try and suck you in, your attention, your focus, your energy. It's all meaningless. It never gives us the satisfaction we're looking for, even if we think it will. Think about this throughout your life. Think about all the times that you've done this continuously. I'll give you an example. Let's say there's an individual. Let's say his name's Bob, for the sake of names. And Bob has gone his whole life, most of his life, up until this point. He's middle-aged. Middle-aged Bob has gone most of his life chasing what he thinks would bring him satisfaction. He went to school. He got a degree. He got a job. He's an accountant. He's working. He's making maybe 6 figures a year. He thought that this would bring him happiness. He's got a family. He's got a wife and children. He thought that this all would bring him happiness. But he realized that he's devoted himself to nothing his entire life. He's devoted himself to an illusion. And Bob has an existential crisis, or a midlife crisis, where he realizes that the entirety of his existence up until this point has been lived for everyone except for him. He went to school to please his family. They paid for his school, so he wanted to please them by finishing his degree and getting a good job. He wanted to please his wife, so he bought a house and a car. He wanted to please his children, so he bought them a bunch of nonsensical toys that they played with once and never touched again. He bought them the iPads and the cell phones and the tablets, and now they spend more time on those devices than they do with him. He doesn't have many friends. His entire life has been devoted to work. He's got a bit of a savings, but he's not doing much with it. And Bob finally realizes that there's got to be something more than this. There needs to be something more than just doing this. And he decides to start living for himself. And what he realizes by doing this is that he is required to give up a lot of the things that he would normally do. And not because it's some disciplined monk mode, need to focus because some guru online told me to do that. No, because he genuinely realized how much time, energy, and attention he's been wasting on all the wrong things. He stops watching Netflix. He stops eating junk food that drains his energy. He stops just constantly working all the time. He starts spending more time with his family, more screen-free time with his family. He takes up golfing. He goes and starts to explore who he is. And he realizes more and more and more who he is not. And all of a sudden, middle-aged Bob the accountant realizes that he's not any of that. He's none of that. And there will come a time, if you sincerely want the thing, whatever that may be for you, where you realize that you are required to give up a lot of stuff, a lot of things you do that waste your precious, vital essence. And I'm not a, over-disciplinary type of person. I don't care for the cold shower sort of, coffee, black coffee and stuff. I like black coffee and I take a cold shower every now and then. But you can't be following someone else's protocol. You need to discover that and uncover that for yourself. If you want the real thing, then you must go after the real thing. And that involves moving away from all that is not real, all that's an illusion, all that's fiction, all that is just utterly nonsense and false. If you want the real thing, you have to do life differently. You have to devote yourself to the calling. Most people don't want the real thing. Most people don't want to give it all up. They're unwilling. That's why very few people succeed. That's why very few people achieve anything great. So, if you do want the real thing, then you must ask yourself, what am I willing to devote myself to? And it's not about one thing. It's not about this idea that it has to be this singular object, right? No, that's not what it's about. It's about devoting yourself to a vision that you have. And by devoting yourself to that vision, then you get the real thing. You get it. It's when you walk around without a vision, or when you walk around with someone else's vision for yourself. And people do it all the time. Look around. Most of the things that you think you want, if I were to wave a magic wand and give them to you today, in a few days, a few weeks, a few months, a few years, they'll mean nothing to you. Most of them. I want the watches, I want the cars, I want the planes, I want all this stuff, the house, yada, 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 the 10K a month, 100K a month, million a month, whatever. If a magic wand was waved and you got out all, you got everything that you think you want, only then would you realize that none of that means pretty much anything to you after a while. And that there's still something missing. That's the real thing. That's the only thing that matters. So if you want the real thing, sincerely, and very few people do. So most people that are listening to this are not going to want the real thing. That's fine. It's not like I'm higher than or lower than because I don't want that. But for those that are sincere and actually want it, then it requires absolute devotion. And devotion requires you to say no to a lot of things, requires you to destroy pretty much all components of self for the thing, because that's how much it means to you. Most people don't know that and will never know that. And that's fine. But if you want the real thing, that's what's required.